Harvey Goldsmith is an iconic and visionary producer and promoter of concerts, charity events and television broadcasts. Working with most of the world's major artists, including the Rolling Stones, The Who, Pink Floyd, Bruce Springsteen and Luciano Pavarotti, Harvey has successfully managed, produced and promoted shows that have shaped the music industry and revolutionised television coverage of events. Among his extraordinary achievements, Harvey orchestrated two of the most monumental televised music events ever held, Live Aid and Live 8, leveraging the power of music to unite and inspire global audiences and provide unprecedented support to charitable causes. I'm delighted to welcome Harvey Goldsmith. It was, Aristotle said, give me a child till the age of 7 and I'll show you the man. How much of your childhood has moulded the man where you are today?
Fair amount, I think, yes.
So it's interesting.
I actually, believe it or not, became a wolf cub because that's what you did, and then joined the Scouts. And, you know, I became a Queen Scout eventually. I learned a lot of skills about confidence, management, and dealing with people, which put me in good stead, actually.
There's a lot of those skills you talk about later on with the Prince's Trust and encouraging people to get into those sort of organisations. Yeah. And your childhood was quite interesting up there in Stanmore and Edgware, growing up with a good group of friends, a strong family.
Yeah, well, where I grew up, the back of our garden was a farm. So it was a pretty new area. When they built the Northern Line and then they built what is now the Jubilee Line, it kind of opened up areas. My parents came from the East End and took the opportunity to move out to the countryside, as it was. Some of it still is. And I had a great upbringing.
And you went to the local state school as well as some fantastic grammar schools there and got up to a little bit of mischief whilst you were there.
Always up to mischief.
What sort of things did you do?
Well, it depends where you're talking about. I mean, I got to my 11 plus, got a scholarship to go to Christ College, which was a pretty good school. Had a lot of fun there, a lot of fun. There was, in fact, we revisited it a few weeks ago. Some friends of ours invited us out to a fish supper, and the fish and chip shop that was there when I went to school was still there. It was a little bit more upmarket today. And next door was the tuck shop, and we used to play poker every lunchtime. That was what we did. But it was a great school. It was good education, good opportunity, tough. I got caned for not wearing my school cap in the bus queue.
It is extraordinary you hear about those sort of days as well. But I think you used to torture the Latin master who used to wear a light jacket and things like that.
Yes, Mr. Barber. He, none of us liked Latin. It was just one of those things. And he always wore a light jacket. And we used, because in those days we had inkwells. I know it sounds like the Dark Ages, but we did. We used to put blotting paper in the inkwell and flick ink pellets as he was scribbling on the board.
And do you still have many of your childhood friends around?
Oh, a few, yeah. Yeah, my oldest friend, he and I were kind of pushed in a pram together, and we've stayed friends ever since. He's a retired lawyer. I'm a retired reprobate, but still working. Yeah, and quite a few other friends, and people I bump into all the time, all over the world, who I either used to go to school with. I've had another friend who I used to sit next to at school that we're very close as well. So it's good. It keeps you, keeps that whole thing going.
Yeah, absolutely. And the interest in pharmacy, because that's what you were originally going to do when you went down to Brighton with that sort of course. Where did that come from?
We were streamed. So we had to decide, whether we were arts or sciences. I chose science. And then we had to choose which sciences, physics, chemistry or biology. I chose biology, so my pathway was set, some form of medical profession or something going forward. I got interested in pharmacy because I was interested in marketing primarily. How were products marketed? And the whole idea of perfumery and cosmetics and how it reacted on people, how it was sold to people. And that's why I chose the course. I was lucky enough to get 3 places, to be offered 3 places at university. And I chose this one because they were offering a kind of applied pharmacy course, which concentrated more on the areas that I was interested in, not, to put it crudely, to be a pill counter. Right. So I went down, I chose, it was at the College of Technology, part of the university. It was a new college. It was all the computing, all sorts of strange things that nobody really knew anything about. And this course sat in the College of Technology in the pharmacy school. And 6 weeks after we started, we were told the good news that the grants didn't come through and the course was cancelled. So we were then given an option to either take a year off, because part of your pharmacy training, you had to do a year's apprenticeship. Well, I did mine first because I wanted to know what I was getting into. So I was apprenticed at the local pharmacy in the High Street. I learned a hell of a lot there, which made me even more determined to understand about marketing and perfumery and cosmetics. I was quite convinced I was doing the right course, but unfortunately the course wasn't ready for us. And we were given the choice of registering for an external London university degree, which is the one thing I didn't want to do, or do our apprenticeship, because most people did it after they got their degree. And I didn't want to waste another year. And so I registered protestingly for my external London university degree and lost all interest. And then I got inveigled into student union, joining the RAG committee, whatever, and I became RAG chairman that year because I really wanted something to do down there, which is a great success, a lot of fun, just a week of madness raising money for charity. And then I went to a student union meeting and I listened to the president of the union go through all the various societies and nuts and bolts of what they did, the bridge club and the rugby club and the cricket club and the debating society. And I stuck my hand up and the president of the union kind of looked up and said, "Who are you?" And I said, "I'm from pharmacy." And everybody laughed. Why are they laughing? They'd never seen a pharmacy student before. No one ever turned up from pharmacy because it was a 6-day-a-week course. Right. It wasn't the standard 1 tutorial and 3 lectures a week. That's it, which is what most of the university was doing. You worked Saturday mornings as well. And so it was full on. Anyway, I stuck my hand up and I said, "Where's the social life?" And the president said, "We just rattled through. Didn't you hear?" And I said, "I heard all that, but where's the social life?" And he said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, this is Brighton. We should be having some entertainment." He said, "Like what?" So I said, "We think we should open a club." And anyway, there was a kind of lot of moving and shuffling around. And the president looked at me and he said, "All right, clever dick, open a club." I said, "Okay, I will." So I did.
And it was 1966, so it took a long time to come up with the name of the club, which was
Club 66.
And what sort of things did you put on there?
Well, it was strange because we started off with local bands and then I started to call agents up and we were booking The Move and The Action and we were booking Fleetwood Mac and the Moody Blues and I mean, that's what you booked.
Do you remember how much you paid for Fleetwood Mac?
50 quid or something.
Right. Extraordinary. But it became so successful that
The second one.
Yeah, well, yes, and you kept on going there. And you went to the bigger venues as well. You went to the Metropole in Brighton.
Yeah, I ended up booking 12 colleges and university all along the south coast. And they were all calling me up saying, I've heard what you've done here, can you do it for us? So I was doing all this for the student union. The student union was making a lot of money. I did a big event at the Metropole, Brighton, with Spencer Davis and The Move and The Action and John Lee Hooker and all sorts of things. I did John Lee Hooker at the Regent Ballroom, which was the fave place, and so on. And it was that time, that middle 60s period is still, in my opinion, the most productive, creative period we've ever seen. It was productive for music, it was productive for style, for fashion, for literature, and for painting, for sculpture. Everything was different.
Yeah. You often talk about that life is all about luck and timing.
Yeah.
Is that a perfect example?
Yeah, absolutely. I think most of my life is just being in the right place and grabbing the opportunity when you're there. And one thing led to another.
Well, you started doing the garden party festivals at Crystal Palace Bowl. How did they come about?
I left. I didn't finish my degree, sadly. I left for my final year because I was just so jaded by the whole thing. I wanted to stand as president of the union, and my professor wouldn't endorse my my application. You had to get the endorsement of a professor. And he said, "You're here to study." And I said, "Well, I'd like to become president of the union." He wouldn't have it. As a sop, I was offered the opportunity to go on an exchange course in America, which is what I did. I had an aunt and uncle living in New York. It was a very hot summer. I went to the University of Toledo in Ohio because it had a pharmacology course that was reputed to be very good. I stuck it out for one semester, had enough of that. Went to New York, stayed with my aunt and uncle, and I saw an ad for a $99 a day, unlimited travel on Greyhound buses for international students. I had an international students card. I thought, this is great. Bought my card, and off I went. And I went right across America. I ended up in Haight-Ashbury by complete accident, like everything else in life. The Greyhound bus stopped downtown. I was planning to stay in the U. I dumped my bags in the U. And as we were crossing over Golden Gate Bridge, I saw there was this whole crowd and I could hear music going. And I asked what it was, and they said, "Oh, there's a concert at Golden Gate Park." So I went there, worked my way backstage as one does. And the Quicksilver Messenger Service, which was Stephen Stills' band, and the Grateful Dead were playing.
Right.
And I met the Grateful Dead, and they loved, in those days, if you spoke English and Cockney English at that, the Americans just swooned all over you. I mean, they just loved, just keep talking. So I met the Grateful Dead, and we became friends for 30 years after that. And I came back, and I was intrigued by in walking around Haight-Ashbury, was all over the walls were these amazing looking posters, right, advertising shows, clubs, dance, whatever it was. And I was so intrigued by the standard of the art advertising. I had no idea who the bands were. I'd never heard of any of them. But they were so good, you just felt, I've got to go and see what this is, because the artwork was so intriguing. So anyway, I then, there were two forces in San Francisco. One was run by Bill Graham, who ran the Fillmore, and the other force, and they didn't get on too well, either of them, but the other side of it was a guy called Chet Helms, who ran the Avalon family dog. I went to see both of them and told them that I was the biggest poster distributor in Europe, and they both gave me a contract to distribute posters in Europe. I wish I'd kept them. I have got them somewhere. I had some quite a lot of memorabilia in a very famous fire at an art warehouse many years ago, and a MoMA, and unfortunately I lost most of those posters because they're worth a fortune. You know, if you can find one under $250,000, you're doing good. Yeah. Particularly the Fillmore ones. Anyway, I came back to England. I saw an ad in the paper. Partner wanted for poster company in the Evening Standard. I thought he was like staring at me. I thought, I'm in. So I went to see, this chap was based in Kensington Market. It just started. It was very famous. It was an old NatWest bank, I think it was, on the corner of Kensington High Street, that became a market, and it was a hippie type market. Right. And his name was Peter Leddybow. He was based there, and he'd just started a company called Big O Posters. And I said, I've got these 2 contracts, and would you be interested in working together? And I started talking about what I'd done or whatever, which he found very interesting. And we started talking up a deal to work together. And he said, by the way, he said, you're about the 5th person that's walked in here with the same contract, which I found very amusing, actually. We became partners. Big O Posters then became a kind of centre point for all the kind of hippie and underground activity, because we backed 2 underground papers. One was called Oz Magazine and one was called International Times. And in return, it was a gatefold poster in each of the Oz magazines, done primarily by Martin Sharp, who's an Australian artist. And we had the rights to sell his posters. That was the grow. We backed the magazine. And the magazine was always getting into trouble. IT was always running out of money, but Oz was always in trouble. And so they were always needing funds to pay lawyers and Lord knows what else. And as things transpired, eventually both of them said, oh, you do concerts, don't you? We're desperate for money. Can you do a concert for us to raise money? Yeah. So I was raising money for other people before it even started. And so that's, there's a very famous concert which you can download called the 40-hour Technicolor Dream that I did at Alexandra Palace, which was about the only loving that we ever had in England. And then I did a big fundraiser to pay for when Oz got busted for obscenity. I did a big fundraiser at Olympia called Christmas on Earth. And that had Jimi Hendrix and the Animals and the Pretty Things and all that kind of thing on it. And the 14-hour Technicolor Dream had the Pink Floyd and artists of that nature. And so I became known for doing all these concerts. Everybody's keep badgering, you've got to do another concert, another concert. And I'm in the poster business, and they're going, well, can you do the concerts as well? And then eventually, of course, I eventually teamed up with an ex kind of student associate who had also been at college, was also bored with what he was doing. He was working for Rothschild, believe it or not, and was sent down to learn about computing. Now, each computer, if you could see this room, it was about double the size of the room, and they were just massive. But they had a big computing department at the college. And anyway, he and I teamed up together. We started working together, and we started doing concerts, and we set up a circuit. So the circuit was, we had the pavilion in Hemel Hempstead, which was the old town hall. We used to do concerts there, and we did them. I mean, you name it, we did it there. We had a club in Harlow called the Birdcage, and we would do concerts at the Roundhouse. when it first became available. The Roundhouse was a train. It had a turntable in it. In fact, it's still there in some form or other. And the trains would go in there. They would clean them, turn them around, and send them out again. Anyway, it was this old disused thing. The GLC supported it, became an arts centre, and we were doing concerts there. And one day, the director of entertainment for the old GLC, the Greater London Council, which morphed into the mayor's office eventually, came to the concert, came backstage, and introduced himself. And he said, I've seen what you guys do. We've got this bowl in Crystal Palace. Have you ever heard of it? And I said, oh, well, I know about Crystal Palace because they had an exhibition there. It's on that side. But there's a bowl there. It's been there for over 100 years. We have 4 to 6 classical concerts in there, and that's it. Would you be interested in doing a popular concert there? Which is what they were called then.
Yeah.
So we went down to see it and fell in love with it. It was just amazing. I mean, we could get 15,000 people in. It was a natural bowl, had a lake in the middle, and this cone-shaped stage. And in 1971, we did the first garden party. And we called them the garden party because we wanted to have that atmosphere. And I put together this bill of the Pink Floyd, The Faces of Mountain, which apparently was very popular because there were queues around the block to buy tickets. It sold out in 3 days.
Do you remember how much the tickets were?
Oh, I don't know, 7 or 6.
And how did the economics work then? You would guarantee a certain amount to the artist, or you just buy it out? Or how did it work?
Up until the garden parties, Michael and I, my partner, did everything. We just funded it ourselves. We either had some money or no money, and we just winged it. It was really... contracts were few and far between. It was our word with the agents. They would send out some scrap of paper, which didn't mean anything. Paid them cash on the night, and off they went, the artists. And it all worked pretty smoothly. It was very rare that artists didn't get paid. It was very rare that things went bust or anything like that. And it was a nice system, and there were hundreds of new acts. Every week there were acts being... I remember... when David Bowie's manager, Tony DeFries, he phoned me up one day and he said, I've got this act, it's going to be the biggest in the world. And I'm going, what? And he said, his name's David Bowie. And I'm going, oh, great. So what? He said, you've got to put him on. And I said, I'll find out. So I made some inquiries, and sure enough, I asked a few people, and they all said, oh yeah, we've seen him, he's great. We booked it. We sold out like that. Everything was word of mouth. Everything. Minimal advertising, a lot of word of mouth. And so we were putting on bands like Hawkwind. We were doing David Bowie, Elton John, Mark Bolan and T-Rex. I mean, one after the other, Manfred Mann. I mean, these acts were just, every week there was another new band to look at. And another great band coming out. And so we just grabbed it. When it came to doing the garden parties, that became serious because that was an investment. Yeah. And we both decided we wanted to get some backers for it because we were concerned. So, of course, we went to our bank, who basically told us to piss off. They said we need 3 years of accounts. We said, yeah, okay, do you want us to make them up? And so that didn't go anywhere. And anyway, we met father and son promoting company called John and Tony Smith. John Smith was father, Tony Smith was the son. They had built a very, very successful promoting business. And they promoting everybody from the Dubliners to the Beatles, to the Rolling Stones, to the Who, and all that kind of thing. And I had the Who at the club couple of times. I loved them. Stones, I don't think we got there, but I went to see them a few times and kind of got to know them a bit. And we went to see them and said, look, we've got this idea. You don't do anything of this nature, because they were basically clubs and regular concert promoters. And they agreed, and we teamed up together, and they put up £100, which was the licence,
right,
the entertainment licence to do the show. And that was it, because it sold out so quickly, they didn't have time to write the cheque and get it go through the banking system. By the time it gone through the banking system, we'd sold out.
right.
So, but we then became partners, and we did 13 or 14 garden parties, which really they were fantastic. And the last one we did was Bob Marley.
Right.
And that was his last big show that he ever did. And we did the Beach Boys. We filmed one of the garden parties for a TV special in America. We did Yes, we did Elton John. We even did Andy Williams and an orchestra. And the whole secret was this lake. The reason why Crystal Palace was built that way, because there was no electricity. So the cone-shaped stage was acoustically stroke of genius. It was like your inner ear. And so if you stood at the front of the stage and whispered towards the back of the stage, you could hear it up the hill. The lake was the amplifier, because when sound hits water, it bounces up. So the whole bowl around was, you could hear the sound acoustically. You didn't actually need amplification.
Right.
But of course you did with the electronic bands or whatever. So that was why it was built that way originally. Very clever. And those shows were real highlights. They were all fantastic individually, totally different types of shows. And that really set us off in a different direction. And then I started doing a lot of the touring with John Smith. And then we were touring, we used to put packages of acts together. So we did something called the Naughty Rhythms Tour, which had a whole load of acts on it. And then we used to tour Genesis. We did a lot of work with Chrysalis and another label. And the label that Genesis were on, we toured them all over the place until it got to the point where Tony Smith was always touring Genesis. I was always out with the Who and the Stones, because that was my thing from the get-go. And I did a week at the Roundhouse with them, and I toured them around the country and so on and so forth. Tony got very close to Genesis during our touring, and they then came to see him and said, look, you may think we're doing really well, but we're broke. We just haven't made any money at all. Will you manage us? And in 1975, Tony came, we had a board meeting. We used to have our board meetings in a very famous fish restaurant called Sheiky's.
Oh, right.
Because Sheiky's was originally a restaurant that was supplied by the fish merchants of Grimsby. They used to ship the fish down on ice, and when they ran out, they closed every day.
Just like Leicester Square. Leicester Square,
yeah, it's still there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's still packed out night after night. And it always opened early for dinner. So we used to have a 6:30 board meeting, followed by, we'd order Dover soles that were about a foot wide. And we'd have our board meeting in the corner, and then we'd have Dover soles for dinner. That was our regular thing at Sheiky's. And one evening, Tony suddenly announced, he said, Genesis have asked me to manage them. And we said, oh, great. Because we were managing a band called Family as well, which had fallen out with their original. They're a Leicester based band,
yeah.
And they'd fallen out with their manager and came to see us. So Michael, who was my partner, he was looking after Family. Tony was looking after Genesis. And I was doing all the promoting. And John Smith, Tony's father, had a chain of clubs. Right. So it was a Great little grouping. And then Tony said, Genesis have come to me and said that they want me to manage them full time and they don't want me doing anything else. And I'm going to do it. And it split the business up. And we all decided it was obvious how to do it, which is how I took over the promoting company, right, which Tony didn't really want to do. Tony took over Genesis. Michael managed Michael managed family, and John carried on with his clubs. He had about 8 clubs all over the place, including one in the Caribbean, and very successful clubs. So it was natural. So the end of 75, I then started my own business.
And that's when you did the Loftus Road concert at Queen's Park Rangers with Yes. Is that right, in 75?
Yeah.
So tell me how that came about, because obviously you're dealing with all these major artists. Did they come to you or you went to them and suggested it?
I had a slightly different way of working with artists than most of the other promoters, and still do today. I felt from the get-go that if I'm going to enjoy this business, and it's a pretty risky business, as I call it, you're running a wet nappy service as a promoter, and indeed as a manager as well, that first of all, I've got to enjoy the music, because I can't get excited if I can't enjoy the music. And secondly of all, I have to have a relationship with the artist, because then I can understand what they really want, not what somebody else who's the agent or the flunky or the tourman or whatever he is, who's not the artist, who's giving me their interpretation of what they think the artist want. So my relationship with everybody I work with is always with the artist. Not that I wanted to ignore all of the other people that surround an artist. I just wanted to get from the horse's mouth, what is it you want? And once I understood what they wanted, then it made it a lot easier for me to sit down with the agents and the managers and so on and so forth and work it out. So I got deeply involved with a lot of artists. I helped put their productions together, their shows, their creative side, all sorts of things.
Their posters, you did their posters as well.
Their posters. And so that's really how it built up. The agents started to hate me because a lot of the big acts I work with said we don't need an agent, because I didn't see myself as an agent. I saw myself as more of a coordinator, producer. So they didn't like it at all. But I wasn't out to compete with them. There was enough acts around, but the Rolling Stones never had an agent. The Who never had an agent. Genesis didn't. Well, they did, and then they didn't have an agent, and then they did again. Yes didn't have an agent. Emerson, Lake and Palmer didn't have an agent, and so on. So, in fact, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, I got involved with them because their management was part American and part English. Robert Stigwood, right, and an American manager called D. Anthony, who was a real character, who became a dear friend down the road. Stigwood had a lot of acts, Eric Clapton and Cream and
the Bee Gees
and so on and so forth. And he had a record company. I mean, he was a big Australian impresario, and he and I got on really well together. Right. He's a real character, wonderful character. But he also had an agency, whatever, and he knew that after a while some of these acts are going to leave. Emerson, Lake and Palmer had an accountant whose son I used to sit next to at school. And one day, his name was Stuart Young, one day Stuart called me up and he said, my dad's looking after a pop group. I said, a pop group? I said, what are they called? He said, they're called Emerson. I said, Emerson, Lake and Palmer. I said, they're hardly a pop group. He said, well, they've been to see my dad and they've asked if he could look after them. what do you think? I just looked, so I said, do you realise how big they are? He said, I don't know anything about them. Because Stuart was, he was at LSE, he'd studied accountancy, but he was on a higher level and all that. And I said, just grab them. And to this day, he still manages some of them, and we're still friends and whatever. We used to sit next to each other at school.
It is incredible, those long relationships, isn't it? Because a lot of the artists that you mentioned, you worked throughout your career.
Yeah.
Why do you think those relationships last so long?
Why? It's got to be a two-way process. I mean, it can't be a one-way process. So you either feel you've got some camaraderie together and can talk to each other, or you don't. So I just met a group of people that, we just became friends and still are. A lot of them. And
it was the starting stage, if you like, of the music industry, wasn't it? So you're formulating. There was no sort of set deals, and nothing, you have to do it this way. So
No, there weren't any deals. There was nothing set. The bar was changed in how the promoter-manager-artist relationship, of course, by Peter Grant. Before that, some promoters and managers were doing 50-50 deals with artists. Some were doing 75-25 deals in their favour. There were no rules. And Peter changed all that with Led Zeppelin because they were so popular and invented the 90-10 deal. But there were 85-15 deals, 80-20 deals. It just depends. It's about negotiation. The only thing that I had, again, luckily enough, I didn't have to have contracts with artists. I would talk to the artists, find out what they want, talk to the manager, talk to the agent if there was an agent involved. We'd figure out what to do. I'd get involved in the promoting side of going to see the record companies and understanding where their heads were at, which was always nothing to do with us, but we're putting the record out. And so try and time it in so that you could cross-promote the record and the show and so on and so forth. And shake hand, get on with it. The only time we ever had contracts was to deal with the tax, with the Inland Revenue, because they were sniffing around saying, where's the contract? So quite often I do contracts with some of the bigger artists after I finish the show.
Right.
Settled it.
Well, you mentioned television as well, and some of the first ones that you were doing at the Crystal Palace Bowl. Tell me how those television contracts worked and the relationship with the TV companies.
Music has never really sat well with television. It's you can't reproduce the dynamic of being at a music gig on TV. You just can't. It doesn't matter how clever you are, you can't reproduce it. So it's always, in a way, plain art. So it was never, ever looked as mainstream. There were, of course, Top of the Pops, and then there was the Old Great Whistle Test, which were different types of programme. But as footage for music, it was certainly popular music. It's never really been that successful. But what it became was a way of promoting the TV station. So they would hang on, like today with Glastonbury, for example. I mean, the BBC spend more time advertising Glastonbury than anything else they do, because for them it's a feel-good, it's a great thing. They've overdone it, but nevertheless, they use it as a promotional tool. The audience is irrelevant. So it's always been a bit difficult, but nevertheless, TV did take advantage of music shows every so often, and initially more radio shows. So shows were being recorded that I didn't even know what they were for, mainly for American radio. The King Biscuit Flour Hour became a series where I would say 50% of its output were shows that were recorded in the UK, not in America. And it was only for American consumption. So slowly but surely, different ways were found about dealing with TV. And sometime later, I started working with Queen. And Jim Beach, who was managing Queen, myself, and I then had another partner when we transformed the company. We started looking at TV, and we ended up doing a deal with Tyne Tees Television, and we set up a partnership called Hadrian. And Hadrian produced all of the concerts for ITV. And we were doing a lot of them. And we were doing them all over the world as well. So the first time Bruce Springsteen had played an open air show was at Red Rocks, Denver, and our director went out and directed the show, and so on. So, and we were selling the TV specials that were all over the world. And funnily enough, even though we had this partnership with ITV, at least 50% of our output went to the BBC. So they somehow closed their eyes. I mean, it was very early days. Now it's done all the time, but then it was unheard of.
As you say, you're moulding the industry. So the early deals then for television, how did they work?
They were really simple. The broadcaster, there was always a principal broadcaster. They were brought in. They would pay for filming it. We would allow them to film it. The artist would get scale, union scale, and we own the rights if we could. Or we would co-own the rights. Or indeed, if it was if it went through Hadrian, which most of it did, then it went into the TV joint venture we have with Tyne Tees. Tyne Tees was kind of the go-to place for music or entertainment on TV anyway. That's how we did it. And then we would then distribute them around. They would have it, the principal broadcast would have its own territory, and we would have it for the rest of the world. And the artist would earn most of the money out of the rest of the world. We would take a commission for what we did, and they earned the rest. So everybody did well out of it. And
in terms of setting the figures, it really was a finger in the air and see what we can get away with. Is that right?
To a point, yeah. I mean, there were no hard and fast rules. It depends how many territories were interested, how big the act was, what it was worth in other territories. Some countries, Germany, for example, because I remember in the 70s and 80s, the BBC was other than public broadcasting in America, which also had some form of advertising, was the only non-advertised. There was ARD in Germany, that was it. So all the others were commercial stations. So they would pay a commercial rate because obviously for them the promotional value increased the sales they could do with advertising. So they would pay for it. So we did work. We enjoyed doing it.
Do you know roughly how much you were getting for license fees and things like that at that stage?
Sometimes we would, depending on how we sold it, sometimes we would do a global deal. We'd get up to $1 million for it. More often or not, in the 250, 300,000, depending on how big the act was and what we did. So that whole industry kind of was born not just from me, but from other people doing this, where they realised the value of it as TV started to become more popular.
And did they have to tailor the concert to take account of the television coverage, or was it just that fly-on-the-wall recording of it?
No. The only thing that changed was the lighting value, because obviously the lighting for filming a TV show was different from the lighting for a concert. Other than that, absolutely not.
1979, you did one of the major concerts on the charity side for Kampuchea. How did that come about?
I started working with all of the Beatles individually. When I did the Technicolor Dream way back in 67 or 68, I worked with Yoko Ono, and we created a stunt where we put a ladder on the side of the stage, and we got a newborn young lady to sit on top of the ladder with a sheet over her, and Yoko went on stage, and there was a pair of scissors on a string dangling down from the thing, and she said that she made this announcement during the concert, and we had a helter-skelter in the middle, and when you came into Alexandra Palace, there was a huge plexiglass dome. Inside was a naked lady, and it was full of bananas, and every time somebody came in and gave their ticket, a hand came up with a banana in it. That's what we did. Big helter-skelter in the middle, 2 stages, and on the main stage where the organ was, Yoko went on stage said, we'd like people to come up during the concert and cut off a piece of the sheet for peace. And so as the concert went on, odd people would pitch up, they'd look round, a bit embarrassed, and get his scissors and cut it. Suddenly, about 2 hours in, there was a whole kerfuffle going on the side of the stage. And I shot over there because I was running around like a lunatic trying to get acts on and off, and there were 2 stages and it was mayhem. And I got excited, what the hell's going on? And we photographers scrambling, pushing each other and this, that. And I go, what? And suddenly I realised that this poor girl was sitting there with 3 bits of sheet left. 1, 2 here and 1 there. And the photographers were going nuclear. And I go, oh my God, I just forgot, we all forgot about it. And this saga went on for weeks. The news of the world of the people who had just had a field day. And it transpired that the young girl was Lady somebody or the other, daughter of one of the great dukes. So that embellished it even more. We didn't even know that at the time, but it became this whole stunt. And actually, if you ever go, you can download or pick it out of the BBC archive, and you'll see this. It's hysterical. But so I started working with Yoko. I knew Yoko. I worked with John Lennon when he took a train up to Edinburgh. We worked with him on that. And when Paul left the Beatles and they split up, and he started Wings, we did all the Wings tours. Right. And we set up an organisation which the government ultimately stopped, called the Concert Promoters Association. And what we did is we picked a promoter out in every territory to join this group and said, right, we'll give you all the tours, you do your territory, and everybody did their own. And and everyone was fine with it till the government said it was anti-competitive and stopped us from carrying on with it, which is a shame actually, because it would have done something very special. So what we did was we promoted the Beach Boys, and we promoted Wings with it. Those 2 primarily. We did, I think we did Crosby, Stills and Nash, and we did another big act. I can't remember what it was now. But we set this circuit up. We thought it was a great idea, but the government or some other promoters obviously didn't. So I started working with Wings and carried on working. So Paul came to me and said, I want to do something, because George did his concerts in America, and that was a big deal as well. And he said, I want to do something for Cambridgeshire. And we came up with the idea of doing a week of shows at Hammersmith.
And very successful. It raised, £2 million or dollars? It was a huge amount. And phenomenal. And it was the first big global TV event as well. Tell me about those deals. How did that all come into place?
Same. We had all our contacts by then, and we just went round. It was a bidding war. Because obviously to get someone like Paul McCartney and so on, and Queen at the time, and all the other bands that we had on that week of shows, was pretty good going. So it was just a bidding war, and everybody knew where the money was going. That's what it was for. And I was working with Pete Townsend because we did these shows in Charlton initially. We did 2 shows at Charlton Football Club, broke all records. all records completely. There'd never been so many people at Charlton before or since. And the first one was called Who Put the Boot In? We did a circuit of football clubs. All the profits from that went to battered wives. He formed an association with this lady called Erin Pitsey and started building homes around the country for what were then called battered wives, and wives basically who were abused by their husbands, who wanted shelter with either them or their children. So we built all these shelters. So I've always been involved for some reason or other of doing good cause things, and I don't mind it.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting sort of combination, is that using music for good and the power that you can do. Because obviously,
the power.
Yeah.
Basically, it's the power, because there's nothing better than fans of big rock pop stars. Nothing bigger. And they can use that power to do all sorts of things. 99.9% refuse to get involved in politics, which they could do, of course. But they've often, in fact, out of all of the disciplines, it's always been music that's come to the table when it comes to raising money. Always. And
it's quite extraordinary, as you say, breaks the mould in terms of television and so on and so forth. We wind forward a few years from the concert for Kampuchea, which is 1979. You were only 33 at the stage, quite a youngster. 39, Bob Geldof, who you've been working with Boomtown Rats and the Jam and various other damn bands that you liked. He knocks on your door, having had the success of Do They Know It's Christmas, and says, I want to do a concert. Tell me about
that. The Band-Aid record, we all had seen these TV pictures that Michael Berg put out on the 6 o'clock news. Never before, to my knowledge, had anybody seen pictures of kids and people starving. They'd never been seen before. And so we were all mesmerised by it. Bob and Midge went one stage further, wrote the song, and then recorded the record with initially it didn't have anybody, but then one by one they all pitched up. And started this whole genre of activity. And he didn't want to go, but he was pushed into going to Africa because he felt, I'm not here, it's not an entertainment thing I'm doing, we've done our bit. Anyway, he went to Africa and he realised it was the tip of the iceberg. So while he was there, his thoughts came together and he came back and he said, basically, we've got to do some more. We've got to raise more money. How do we do it? And he said, we've got to do a concert. So he started badgering me. And it wasn't that I was unresponsive, but I was really up to my neck. I was looking, Roger Waters had split from the Pink Floyd, and I was producing his first solo tour. He just recorded his first solo album. We were putting these ideas together. We were opening at Radio City in New York. George Michael was in Wham at the time, and I did every concert of any sort that Wham had ever done, and was very close to them. And Simon Napier Bell, their manager, phoned me up one day and said, I'm in Hong Kong. I said, great, because he was kind of half-based away from England. He said, we're going to do 2 concerts at the Coliseum in Hong Kong. I said, oh, great. And then we're going to China. I can't go to China, so you'll have to go. And he put the phone down. Oh, what the hell's this? So I'm now trying in my brain. And also Bruce Springsteen was going to do Wembley. So
he started off as Earl's Court. He wasn't quite sure he was going to do Earl's Court for 6 nights or Wembley on that same.
That's a whole other saga. So I've got Bruce Springsteen playing Wembley Stadium. I've got Wham going to Hong Kong and then delving into the unknown in China. And I've got Roger Waters doing his first solo dates with this hydrophonic head, which sat in the middle of Radio City, suspended, and the sound emanated up to the head and was then spread to speakers all around the theatre, which no one had ever done before. And I just, in the back of my mind, thought this is going to be chaos. And there's Bob driving me mad. You've got to do a concert. I said, I can't even think about it. I said, when I get back from China, if it's still there, I'd love to help. And all my thoughts were, A, getting from New York to China wasn't easy. And B, just getting through. I had no idea what we were going to meet in China. I just had no concept. I'd been to Russia because I took Elton John to Russia in '78. That was the first, other than Cliff Richard, who went there on some crusade thing. He was the first kind of real Western pop act to play in Russia. So I knew a fair bit about it. But China, I didn't have any benchmarks to work to. And I hadn't been involved in any of the arrangements. It was just Simon just said, you've got to do it. Just deal with it. So we went to New York. Roger Waters was a triumph, and that was great. I then got on a plane, I don't know where, God knows where. We went to Tokyo, and then we went to somewhere else before. Eventually, I arrived in Hong Kong. I didn't know where it was. I got there for the last concert at the Coliseum in Hong Kong. Wham did 2 shows. It was total mayhem. They were so popular there. And the next day, off we went to China. So we got on the train to go to Guangzhou, and lovely train, very nice. And when we got to the other end, I just didn't know what was happening. But 2 things I always remembered: if you're going to strange territories, take a suitcase full of merchandising. You'll never fail. So I did that with Elton, with records and T-shirts and hats. With Wham, it was cassettes and T-shirts. And I told the tour manager, don't put it on the trucks, just take it with us. You never know when we're going to need it. And sure enough, we got to the Chinese border, and the guards looked at us and going, who are you? And I said, we're with Wham. And they're going, and they're looking at it. There's like 50 of us. They're looking at everybody going, who are these people? So I said, and they said, how are you here? I said, the All China Youth Agency. And they kind of nodded their head and go, looking around, where's the All China Youth Agency representative? Nowhere to be seen. So we're standing, the train's gone, we're at the border, immigration. So I grabbed hold of the tour manager. I said, get the suitcase out. Got the suitcase out. We started giving out T-shirts and cassettes and hats. So all the border guards said, oh. And strangely enough, all that was there at the border was 2 coaches outside the station. And they were just sitting there. Nobody came to meet us. Nobody knew what was happening. Anyway, I managed to get everybody through, and I said to everybody, when we get to wherever we get to, don't unpack, because I'm not sure what the hell's going on. The bus was there, and I'm going, Wham, and the bloke went, oh, Wham. We go on the buses. We didn't know where we were going. It was so funny. We arrive in Guangzhou, and we stop at this really nice looking hotel, and we thought, oh, this looks good. Go to the hotel. Yes, we are expecting you. They spoke quite good English, and all good. And I thought, well, at least we've got a decent hotel, we're not going to end up in some godforsaken hellhole. And we checked into the hotel, and I said to everybody, just don't get too busy, because I really do not know what's happening next. And then we're all exhausted. I didn't actually know where I was, because I'd gone from one side of the world to the other. And I'm fast asleep, and the phone rings. And it's ringing and ringing and ringing and ringing and ringing. I pick the phone, I go, yeah. And they go, Mr. Harvey? I said, yes. And they said, come quick. I'm downstairs. I'm going, who are you? Thinking, I don't know what's going on. It turns out our promoter for the All China Youth Agency had been at the venue because it wasn't till midnight the night before the concert that he got his licence. He said, get dressed. I got dressed. I went down to jump in the car. I'm going, where the hell have you been? He said, no, all good. And he explained we have licence. And I can't get in my head. They got the licence at midnight. The show's the next day. We got to the venue at 2:30 a.m. and there were people in a concentric circle about 3 times around the building, all waiting for tickets because they couldn't go on sale till they got the licence. That's how China started.
Incredible. So you came back from China. It's always seemed to be up to the last minute, and you arrive in your office and you have a visitor.
Yeah, Bob came to see me, and he was kind of waiting for me and said, we've got to do this concert. And he gave me the dates he wanted to do. I said, no, you can't have those dates. Bruce Springsteen's doing them. He said, well, Bruce Springsteen will be part of it. I said, I doubt it, because that wasn't his way. Anyway, it was 10.5 weeks from start to finish.
Before the concert. And this is the extraordinary thing. You talk about things being last minute. Actually, July the 13th, 1985, a few weeks before that. Last minute, you obviously getting a broadcaster on board and doing effectively 16 hours of live music was a first. How did that come about?
Bob went to see Mark McCormack. Mark McCormack, eventually, he run all the various broadcasts. Eventually went to Channel 4, and Channel 4 said they'd give him 2 hours. So we had 2 hours in our back pocket, and I said, that's not good. And Bob said, no. So I knew the old Great Whistle Test people very well. I'd been on the show a number of times, and I knew Mark Appleton. So I phoned Mark Appleton up, and I said, you've got to help me out. We've got this idea, we're going to do this show, and he got totally involved in it. I said, who do we talk to? So he said, I'll talk to the head of daytime television, which I subsequently found out there wasn't a head of daytime television at the time. But he had some role or other that equated to it. His name was Roger Lawton. We went to see Roger Lawton, and he was terribly sympathetic because he himself had given money because of the results of those pictures on the news and the Band Aid record. He realised, he said, I don't know if we could do this, because Bob kept banging the table, so we've got to show the whole concert. And by that time, which was about 3 weeks in, Bob had convinced me we had to do a show in America as well. We didn't have a show in America, but they didn't know that. So he said, we're going to have a show in America as well. Roger looked and said, the test matches are on. I don't know. We might be able to split the broadcast between BBC One and BBC Two. I'll go and see the Director General and see what he says. And the last thing that happened was, it was a Friday afternoon, Bob said, I want the answer Monday morning. Anyway, Roger did his trick. He went to see Michael Gray. Michael Gray thought about it over the weekend, and on following Tuesday, he phoned up and said, I've thought about it. I'm going to clear the schedule. And from that point onwards, we had a show.
Yeah. And everything fell into place at that stage. What was extraordinary and legendary on that sort of basis is that you had a press conference at Wembley, and at that stage you didn't have any other acts other than the Boomtown Rats.
You had the Boomtown Rats.
You had the Boomtown Rats, who couldn't quite fill 16 hours, as great as they are. And Ultravox, because of Midge's involvement.
That was it.
That was it. And the press, biggest press pack you have seen.
Ever.
So tell me about that moment and what Bob did.
We were in the ballroom of Wembley Stadium. I think there were 480 members of the press there. I've never seen anything like it. Press, TV, radio and general media. There was myself and John Kennedy and Midge, and I sat next to Bob. And I got up, thanks everybody. Bob got up and said, we're going to do this concert, whatever. And somebody, one of the journalists, put his hand up and said, who's playing? And he just rattled off a list of names. And I literally was kicking him. I was kicking his shin under the table. I said, shut up, I'm brilliant. None of them. But anyway, he announced this long list of names, that all the ones he could think of. And then when we got out, I said, are you nuts? What do you mean? Who? None of them. Not one anyway. They all, one by one, most of them fell into place. That's how it worked. But it was hysterical.
And very, like, as you say, once one person's in place, say, well, such and such is doing it, and then for everybody else.
Well, everybody calls everybody else. It's the standard way of the way things work. And they, so word got out, and one act would call the other act, you doing it, what do you think, blah, blah, blah. Eventually we ended up, of course, with more acts than we needed, which is always the case. Always the case.
And interesting from a running order point of view, a lot of it was dictated as much like a show, but also from a technical requirements. Talk to me about that.
I put my foot down and said, this show will run the way I want to run it, because otherwise I can't guarantee, A, that we'll end each act on time, B, I don't want long changeovers because they're awful. And so you just got to leave it to me to figure out how to put this together. And I sat down with my technical guys, and between us, we worked out the way to do it. And then we came up with the idea of this turntable stage. So we had one act loading on, one act performing, and one act coming off, and it just turned. And even though it broke down the night before, on the day it worked brilliantly.
Now, what I loved about that story is that you say your team were exhausted in the morning. It wasn't working, it wasn't turning.
The night before it wasn't, no.
And so you had to bribe them with beer, I think, in the morning, didn't you?
Yeah, I said, we'll just send out for a load of mice and put them in a treadmill.
And you also had acts, because obviously some people are going to have the ABC, I think, were only doing 2 hours as opposed to MTV, who were doing total broadcast. You'd have the heads of industry phoning you up and telling you, we've got to make sure we're in the 2-hour version.
Yeah, the night before was awful. It started off with my production manager phoning me up about 9 o'clock saying the turntable's not working and everybody's going home. In which case I went to the off-licence, bought 3 crates of beer and drove down to Wembley and just sat everybody, gave them all a beer, and we figured out how to get the thing working. Some piece of scaffolding or something got caught in the turntable. That's what it was. So we fixed that. I got home about midnight, pretty exhausted, and the phone started ringing, and it was Tommy Mottola, who was the head of Club, saying, and he was managing Hall & Oates at the time, and he said, Hall & Oates aren't on the ABC TV special. And I'm going, and he said, if you don't put them on, I'm going to pull Mick Jagger and Tina Turner or whatever. And I was at the point, I said, just whatever you want, care less. But Bill Graham phoned up and said, Black Sabbath have got to be on it because I'm doing their merchandising. But so what? As much as I love Black Sabbath, and I did, because I did all their touring. But nevertheless, it just got to the point where we had what we had. We had to make it work. We couldn't deviate from it. The timing was everything. Yeah. The key principle of that show was timing. And on the morning of the concert, I woke up very early, and I was really thankful because the sun was out, because you never know what was going to happen. And I got down to the venue at about, 8 o'clock in the morning. And I sent out for 40 clocks. And clocks about that big.
Yeah.
And I put these clocks everywhere with a little note underneath. So I don't care what time you go on, but I do care what time you come off. Please stick to your allotted time. And of course, everybody did. I mean, I've never seen, a lot of the acts were notorious about being late going on stage. George was the worst. Elton would go on when he was ready, and it didn't matter what you said or what you did. When he was ready, he'd go on stage, and so on and so forth. A lot of acts were. We just couldn't afford to have any delays whatsoever. It was split timing, because we were also conscious that there were satellites somewhere in the sky, and we had to hit a certain point when we get the programming from America. Everybody was played the game. Every act was waiting on the side of the stage 5 minutes before they were even being called. So it just worked brilliantly.
And it was a seismic moment in terms of television. I mean, how do you think television changed as a result of it?
I don't know about television, but showbiz changed as a result of it, because what the media figured out was that music sold newspapers. And up to that point, it was really the only time you'd read about artists was when they'd either been busted or were getting divorced. That was it. So the cult of celebrity came out of that. For TV was quite proud of itself because it realised it could raise a lot of money.
Right.
And so out of that came Children in Need and that kind of thing.
It was the start of all the big telethons and things like that. Yeah. And you also had Live 8 a few years later. You decided to do it all again on the 2nd of July, 2005. I was there, thanks to you. The biggest collection of
artists. Live 8 was different.
225 artists.
Live 8 was completely different. We didn't want to do Live 8. The trustees of the Band Aid Trust, the same trustees, with the exception of Maurice Oberstein, who unfortunately passed away, from the get-go. And we all met beforehand, 2007. In fact, we probably started 2006 thinking about it. And so we decided to put out the DVD. And then there was this call, because we were hosting the G8 concert, G8 meetings. And what came about was that Africa wasn't on the agenda anywhere. And so there was a whole movement of people who were quite determined to put Africa on the agenda for the leaders of the G8 countries to talk about it. And the pressure came, strangely enough, from Bono, U2, from Madonna, and from Elton. And they were really pressurising us to do something. And that's how it came about. We had no intention of doing it at all. But it was a pressure point. The whole idea of Live 8 was to put pressure on the leaders of the world's biggest economies to put Africa on the agenda and to ensure that there were some beneficial results to those countries, forgiving the debt and so on and so forth. And so there was a whole list of requests that we put in. And what happened was we put enough pressure on that they actually did it. Right. And so with Gordon Brown and Tony Blair, they put it, it became on the agenda. And then they started, of the foreign ministers first, but then they started to really discuss how to deal with that. Because up to then, they'd never talked about it.
And it's the power of the media, isn't it? You have, 160 television stations, 400 radio stations around the world. Was it a lot easier the second time round? They now knew what was going to happen?
Yes. The only problem we had was with the parks and the police. Everybody else was great. All the territories were great, all the countries. We did, 7 shows or 8 shows in total around the world all at the same time. All the governments got it, everybody got it, except the parks and the police.
Right. And you've got quite a history.
They try to shut us down.
Well, yeah. And you've got quite a history with parks and the police and so on. So they seem to be your biggest obstacle of all, don't they? Winding backwards, if you like, to Pavarotti and the glorious things in Hyde Park.
Well, it was in 91.
91, yes. So if you're talking on that sort of basis and how you had to deal with the problems there, because they hadn't had a concert in Hyde Park at that stage for 20 years. I think it was the free concerts they used to have.
Yeah, so Queen I did the last concert, there was Queen. We'd had this dreadful hurricane in England in the previous October or November, and thousands of trees were blown down by the terrible storm that we'd had. And so we were trying to figure out what to do. And I was working on the 30th anniversary of Pavarotti performing, and we were trying to come up with some ideas, and we said, well, let's do Hyde Park. So I went to the authorities and they said, no, you can't do any concerts in Hyde Park. And at that time I was involved with the Prince's Trust, and I thought, I'm going to get hold of the Prince of Wales and persuade him into it. So I came up with the idea that we'd do it to plant trees, which he loved. And ultimately, eventually and reluctantly, the Parks agreed to allow us to do the concert, which became infamous in its own way, or famous in its own way, because up until the night before, it was boiling. And my concern, I remember walking around the night before with St John's Ambulance and the fire brigade, worried that we didn't have enough water stands. And on the morning of the concert, it was really dark and gloomy and spitting a bit. By about 10 o'clock, it was pouring with rain, and it did not stop till about 2 o'clock in the following morning. So we did the whole concert in the rain. But before that, I went to the police because at the time, what was happening, the residents who lived around the park were giving the Royal Parks hell about events all across the board, particularly not having any concerts. So when this came about, firstly, I sent some guys out with sound meters to check which day was the quietest day of the week. And believe it or not, it turned out to be a Tuesday.
That's why you picked today to interview. Absolutely, Tuesday's the right day.
Tuesday's the right day. And then I thought, if the parks people and the police were really driving me mad, saying you've got to be finished by this, you've got to this, blah, blah, blah. So I suddenly, I'm walking down Park Lane and I thought, this is nuts. There are 3 exits. And I don't know, it was a free concert. I don't know how many people are going to turn up. I suspect, 50 to 75,000. There were more like 150,000. So I went to the parks and I said, look, can we cut holes in the fence? I'll pay for putting them back and let people escape out over at least half a dozen exits. So that way we can clear the park quickly. And then I went to the police and I said, look, I'm doing this concert, whatever. Coming in won't be so bad. But at the end of the concert, everybody wants to evacuate quickly. And I've got to get everybody out on double quick time. Can you close Park Lane from one end to the other for 15 minutes? And they looked at me as if I was nuts. He said no. And I said, well, I'm not going to give up on this. And I got higher and higher and higher. And in the end, I got to the top of the pole at the Met. And I went to Scotland Yard and I sat in this guy's office. I said, I'm not leaving until you agree to this because there's no other way of getting people out. So I said, do you want a riot? You've got one end, you've got the park beaters who are going to be pushing people out into the roads. There's going to be terrible accidents because the pavement can only take so many people deep. And you're going to be pushing people in the road. Close the road for 15 minutes. It's only 15 minutes. We'll get the bulk of the people out and then get on with their life. Anyway, they reluctantly agreed to it. And actually, we cleared the park in about 8 minutes.
Yeah. And those are the statistics. They are amazing on that basis. Yeah. How quickly, because you're getting 99% of the people out.
Nobody was hanging around. I mean, the park thing, everybody wants to party. Yeah. Well, when it's pouring with rain, they want to get out.
But it's another theme that runs throughout your career is that you find solutions. People will talk about the sort of problems. Another great example is the suggestion, which was bizarre at the time, about having a Formula One race in the centre of London. Talk me through that.
That wasn't my idea.
It was good old Ian's, wasn't it? Absolutely.
My dearest friend, who was my accountant, became a local councillor.
The video vigilante, they called him.
And Councillor Ian Wilder. And we were at a charity dinner and Bernie Ecclestone was my guest. And he was sitting on one side and Ian was sitting on the other, and I introduced him. Ian was a bit of a character. And Ian suddenly leant over and he said, "Why can't we do a Formula One race in London?" And Bernie said, "I'd love to." And he said, "Well, I've got an idea." And Bernie said, "Well, if you come up with that, yeah, we're in." And that was the end of it. Well, Ian being Ian, the next morning he phoned me up. He said, "We're having breakfast with the chief executive of the Crown Estate tomorrow." I said, "That's nice. What's the reason?" He said, "Well, I don't know if you know, but they own Regent Street and they own Bond Street and whatever. And we're going to talk to them about closing Regent Street down." I said, "Oh, great." And it turned out that the CEO was a racing nut. He loved it. So we had breakfast and we went to Home House. We had breakfast. And I said, and Ian said, "Look, you know, we talked about it. Bernie's up for it. We're going to do it. And Harvey, you know who he is." And he kind of nodded. He said, "I'm not sure whether he did or he didn't." He said, "Yes, yes, yes." He said, "Let's, you know, do the race." And he turned around and he looked at me and he said, "Which day would you like to do it?" I went, "Really?" And I said, "Well, I've just learnt from Pavarotti that the least amount of traffic during the week is on a Tuesday. Let's do it on a Tuesday." He said, "Okay, how long do you want?" I said, "Well, I want to cause as minimum upset as possible. So if we could close the roads for about 7 o'clock in the morning so that we can prepare, because we've got to lay all the safety things out, whatever, we'll do the race about 5 o'clock. I should think we'd be out by 7.
Right.
And he said, "Done." And I looked at him and I said, "What do you mean done?" He said, "Done, no problem. Love the idea." I kind of went, "Huh?" So I said, "Well, what do I have to do? Do I have to get road closure orders? I'm going to go to the council." He said, No, we own the road." I said, "What does that mean?" He said, "We own the road. If we want to do it, we do it." So we did it. The council and the police went loopy. They did everything they possibly could to stop it. And the one thing they did which was completely perverse, they precluded us from announcing it or promoting it or marketing it or anything. 480,000 people showed up.
It was amazing. I remember they were coming up with all sorts of crazy excuses as well, saying that there's a congestion charge and you can't make more than 30.
Wait. 2 weeks before, we had a command post in an office in halfway down Regent Street, which was the West End, the Regent Street Association, something like that. And that's where we'd all meet. So we're up there all morning, and this police commander comes in, and with the head of entertainment for Westminster Council, and the police commander, a very tall chap, and he stood up and he looked at me and he said, 2 things. You do realise there's a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit, and all the cars are going to pay congestion charge. And I went, okay. I said, "Bernie, how do we do congestion charge?" He said, "Don't be daft." He said, "They're not even registered. They don't have a number plate. How can they do congestion charge?" And I said, 30 miles an hour. And he laughed his head off. He said, "They rev up at 80. They don't get out of first gear till they're doing 80 miles an hour." It was hysterical. But it was fun. It was really good. And it showed what you could do. And London should have a race.
Well, they're talking about it. There may be one around City Airport and that sort of thing. They're discussing it at the moment, like all these.
I actually worked a route out.
Okay.
Charlie Watkins was the race, for Formula One. He would do all the circuits. He and I worked a circuit out around Docklands. When they were building Docklands, we said, while you're doing it, if you can reverse camber some of the roads, and we could put sleeves in for safety barriers, and so on and so forth, we could prepare it all, we did an economic impact which showed that East London would get 250 million quid's worth of value out of it, and so on and so forth. We figured out we could get 150,000 people in various stands along the circuit. We worked the circuit out, and they were still building it. And some old biddy duchess who was on the something committee said no. And that was the end of it.
It may be
but to their loss, because they're still talking about it. Whatever they do now is going to cost 50 times more than it should have done. And we should have a night race here, like they do in Singapore.
Absolutely. And then what's really interesting, Harvey, is looking at your whole career. It's all about solutions. How do you make things happen? And the other great
straight line, man.
Yeah.
There are people that will zigzag into, by causing a little problem here to solve a problem, to be heroes. I'm a straight line man. If there's a straight line solution, that's the way. Do it.
And you're also in your hands up if you do something wrong. I mean, honestly, truth may hurt, but a lie could kill.
Yeah, of course. You can't, if as much as I'm cantankerous and difficult and whatever, if I could see I've done something wrong, then I'm the first to own up. Because it's problems. Because if you don't need to create a problem, if there's an issue, you can deal with it. If you put the issue in the cupboard and lock the door, it becomes a problem. Once it becomes a problem, it becomes difficult. And beyond that, it becomes impossible. So face up to them as soon as possible. Find there's always a solution. Always.
Artists are notoriously difficult to deal with. And you've not only been promoted, but you've also managed some along the way. Talk to me about some of those. Jeff Beck, how did that come about?
I have managed quite a few. I started off with Billy Connolly and then Van Morrison.
Right.
Van Morrison came to me because Bill Wyman phoned him up. Van phoned Bill Wyman up, so I'm looking for a manager. And Bill said, call me. He would know. So Van was a hero.
Yeah.
I'd always loved Van Morrison. And I went to meet with him, and I had a whole list of managers and all the reasons why to give him.
Yeah.
And he thought about it. He said, no. He said, I thought about it, so I want you to manage me. I said, no, I don't do that. He said, yes, you do. So I ended up managing Van Morrison, which was difficult, but was really a lot of fun. I really enjoyed doing it. He was great, a wonderful character. And in the end, we kind of fell out, but kind of didn't, because he was going to come and live in England. And I said, I can't keep commuting backwards and forwards to America every 3 weeks. It's driving me mad. He said, I'm going to live in England. I found a house for him near, literally 2 doors away from where Jimmy Page now lives. And I showed him the pictures. He said, great. And when he got there, he walked literally to the front door. I opened the front door and he said, this has got bad vibes. I went back to the airport. Literally. Picked him up at 11. We got there about 12:30, 1:45, 2 o'clock. He was on his way back to the airport. Don't ask me why. So in the end, I said, look, I can't keep doing this. So I went to Bill Graham and I became friends. I went to the management side of Bill Graham's office, and a guy called Bill Siddons who knew Van. And I said, look, you're going to have to take care of Van Morrison for me initially. We'll do it together, take care of him. And eventually I said, look, it's easier to have one manager. And so we parted company. So we never really fell out or anything. Billy Connolly was a slightly different story. And then I looked after Roger. I was working with Paul McCartney, of course, and then I was looking after Mick Jagger in his solo career. Right. And then where we got Jeff Beck together to play with Mick, but that didn't quite work out. And then Roger Waters when he left the Pink Floyd. So I became the go-to person when major artists had split from the rest of their bands, and I looked at them as projects. So even Naomi Campbell camped outside my office for 3 days, demanding that I managed her, and I said no. And I love her to bits, but no. Jeff Beck simply was a mutual friend of ours, was with Jeff. I just arrived in New York. She phoned me up and said, I'm with Jeff Beck, we're having a lovely dinner, whatever. He wants to talk to you. So, well, great. I knew Jeff, I'd known him forever. And I started talking. He said, when you come back? I said, look, I just got here. He said, well, can you come back tomorrow? I said, no, but I'll be back next week. Got back, we talked. He said, look, nobody knows who I am. I said, okay. The reason why nobody knows who you are, because you don't do anything. So I said to him, if you're prepared to work, then I'm prepared to put you back where you should be. And I did. And then we fell out. We really fell out because he came to see me, he said, I'm doing too many shows. And I said, well, that's what you wanted to do. I mean, I got him to the point where he was playing, small concert halls to do, 2 nights at Madison Square Garden and Toronto, Montreal, and, 2 nights at the O2 with Eric Clapton and whatever. And we'd really got him back up, and he was a headliner at the New Orleans Jazz Festival and so on and so forth. But he said he started complaining that he was doing too much work. I said, well, I can't help you. And then I really fell out with him because he had the worst record deal I'd ever seen ever. And I went to America, A, to try and buy his catalogue back, and I couldn't. B, to sort his deal out. And he was with Epic. So, and they said, look, if Jeff's prepared to resort his catalogue out, we'll put out retrospective albums. He could remix them. He could do whatever he likes. I'd agreed $1 million advance and doubled his royalties. I came back and told him about it. He said, I don't want you touching my heritage. And I said, but I've just got you $1 million. He said, you're only doing it because you're earning the money. And I go, not exactly. At the end of it, I said, you know what? I'm resigning. He came up the office. He went off in a tailspin. And the next day he came up the office screaming and shouting. He said, you can't resign. I said, what do you mean I can't resign? He said, I have to fire you. I said, it's too late. I've resigned. And unfortunately, for about 2 years, we never spoke. And then I bumped into him at a wedding, and we kind of made it up, but we never really made it up. It was a shame, actually, because I really enjoyed working. I love his music and everything, but it just wasn't to be.
Yeah, it is a shame. He was on the road for a little while with Johnny Depp, wasn't he?
Well, yeah, just before he died, whatever. It is a shame. He was, without doubt, the guitarist. Yeah. And but he just had this thing. He felt just as happy playing guitar as he did tinkering around building classic cars. That was his thing. And that was it. It's just a shame.
You're now working with a number of people. Hans Zimmer, you've done a whole list of firsts that you've done. You wrote all sorts of Cirque du Soleil is phenomenal in terms of that sort of stuff. You've got Hans Zimmer. You're doing breaking all sorts of records around the world.
I believe that I am more of an impresario, I think is the term, than a straight rock promoter. I've always delved into entertainment, and I've always had the same preset that I have to like it. I have to be able to talk to the people and enjoy it. Cirque du Soleil came about because my business associate in LA called me up one day and he said, you've got to come over and see this circus on. I said, where is it? He said, on the end of Santa Monica Pier. I said, you want me to come to LA to see a circus at the end of the pier in Santa Monica, get stuffed? He said, no, you don't understand. You've got to come and see this one. So I thought, this is weird. And anyway, I went to see it. Of course, I fell in love with it. I spent 2 years trying to get them to come over. And eventually, I tried to buy the Roundhouse, funnily enough, but the Roundhouse had been condemned because it was full of asbestos, and they had to sort that out. And then eventually it became a trust. And I went to the Royal Albert Hall with this idea, and they looked at me, we don't do circus. I said, nor do I, but this isn't a circus. And I persuaded Patrick Duker, who was the general manager, to go and see them. He went to see them, and of course, he had the same reaction I did. It took a year to persuade the Royal Albert Hall because of all the fixings we had to do in the floor and change things around or whatever. And we started doing 6 weeks of Cirque du Soleil at the Royal Albert Hall. They've been here there now for coming up for 30 years, I think. I think they're the mainstay. And the Royal Albert Hall run is their of their touring show. It's the biggest earner they have year on year. It's been here every single year. I stopped working with them when they got into trouble and went into administration, and new people came in and they decided to take it all in-house. It was fine with me.
Yeah, typical people change. You've also been involved with television a lot yourself.
Yeah.
And you did Getting Your Act Together. Get Your Act Together with Harvey Goldsmith. Yeah, I think
Smash Hits.
Smash Hits.
I came up with this idea because pop bands in the early 90s really ruled the roost. And EMAP was the big publisher of Smash Hits magazine, along a whole raft of other pop magazines. And I met the editor of Smash Hits, and over one boozy lunch, we came up with the idea, why don't we do the Smash Hits Boulders Party, do a TV show? And again, I did the unusual. I went to the BBC and persuaded them into it. And they bought the idea, and I had a huge row with them because they said, what day do you want to put it out? And I said, they said, you want it on a Tuesday or a Wednesday? I said, look, I don't want to compete with EastEnders or Coronation Street because we'll die. He said, well, we'll put it out Saturday night. I said, no, that's no good either, because again, you've got all the game shows on. And we were going backwards and forwards. I said, look, I'd like to put this out at 3:00 on a Sunday afternoon. And they said, why do you want to do that? You won't get any audience. I said, look, the only day of the week where the kids can get control of the remote and decide what's going on is Sunday afternoon, because Dad's asleep after, or he's watched his football and he's fallen asleep, and no one else, there's nothing else on except the old crappy film we put on. So that would be perfect, and leading into the chart show on radio. And they said, well, nobody will watch it. I said, yes, they will. So they agreed to it. And of course, we ended up getting year on year, 49% of the TV audience. They couldn't believe it. And so this was a staple. So I produced that for 18 years. And I then created, in order to get round the fact that in 90 minutes there were 30 ads for Smash Hits magazine. So I invented something called the reverse co-production, which still sits in the annals of the BBC of being something that they got cajoled into that none of them understand. But basically, it got round all the rules of commerciality and how to deal with it at the BBC. It was a massive success. And artists that we put on there, literally within a week of being on that TV show, could sell virtually 500,000 records. It was unbelievable. It got to the point where we did a road show that led up to the final TV show, and I came up with the idea to freshen it up, to put on some brand new acts who are wannabes, and I came up with this idea, and I thought, let's put 2 or 3 acts on. Let's get the audience at each venue to vote on them, and whoever the overall winner will be, I'll put them on the TV show. Because again, the BBC said, well, why do you want to do that? And I said, it just gives it another twist? Well, it became so successful that I got hauled up to the BPI, who basically, which is the record industry's body, who basically said that they'd had a complaint from the manager of one of the acts to say that I decided who the acts were. And I said, yes. And they said, and I decided who goes on the TV show. And I said, yes, what's the problem? They said, you can't do it. I said, what do you mean I can't do it? They said, if you don't do this correctly and have a proper voting system that's vetted, we'll ban you from doing the TV show. I was completely flummoxed. I'm going, what's the problem? I'm giving 2 new acts. They said, the problem is that it's so successful that everybody's bitching and moaning about why can't they get their acts on. So we had to hire staff from Barclays Bank and I think Price Waterhouse, who had to go round to every venue and vet this vote. We had a voting system, which I thought, what the hell do we need? You know, I'm just my eye, I'll pick them out. But out of it came Boyzone, Westlife, Five, Busted. I mean, one after the other came out of the voting process. It was so successful. It was fantastic.
And this is interesting because you've been the catalyst, if you like, for the relationship with television and the music industry. And it's recognised because the music industry's evolved so much, hasn't it? So you used to make your money from the records and then basically you do touring for next to nothing. And then TV is a shop window.
Promoting the record, yeah.
Yeah. What do you think the next stage is going to be?
God knows. It's a mess. The business is actually in a mess. There's no sustainability. There's no genres. It's too wide, too much opportunity. The whole demographics of how artists earn their money is now completely shifted. It's all live, and live's just about greed and money. So, and acts that are popular today, by the time you figured out the name of the track and the name of the act, they're gone. So it's the old pop days. And so I don't know what's going to happen. Obviously, music's not going to die because it's embedded in everybody's lives, whoever you are. But it's become a different animal. And of course, artists are breaking through because they always broke through. They always will do. It will evolve into something else. Whatever that is, I'm not sure what it is. I hope it does, and I hope it's positive. But I get the feeling we're kind of at the bottom of the run because the dinosaur acts are dying out, even though they're selling more tickets today than they sold in their heyday at 50 times higher prices. Ticket prices are completely off the scale. Part of the damage that's been done by the top echelon of acts charging so much for the tickets is that people don't have the money to invest as a punt to go and see a new act. And so they're struggling. They're having a difficult time. And once you get off that top rung of artists, the next level down are also struggling. It's not easy. And that's not right. And the disparity between one end and the other and the whole way tickets are sold and all the scams and all the rubbish that goes on, it's awful. And to listen last week for the Department of Trade, whatever it calls itself, to block the Competition Markets Authority's recommendations to stop scalpers from selling tickets is just so outrageous. It's beyond belief.
The other thing, obviously, is the advance in technology. You're talking about people living forever with holograms. I know you're heavily involved with that sort of side. And also artificial intelligence. You have Drake doing a collaboration with The Weeknd, which is completely fake. Exactly, completely fake by AI.
It was done.
What are your views on that?
It's going to cause a lot of problems because it's tough enough for the real creators to make a good living unless you're really top dog. So it's going to be even harder if they're now AI comes and fakes it. It's going to be a phase because everybody's now petrified of AI. It's like creating the monster and then not knowing what to do with it. It will settle down. At some point, government will wake up and there'll be some regulation over it and it will work itself through because It has to. So the issue of copyright currently is a big problem. The way people listen to music and the range of music they listen to is good on the one hand, but it doesn't throw up any genres that are leaders on the other hand. And that goes right across the board. And it's exactly as I started in 1966, 67. There was a whole new range of style, fashion, design, music, art, theatre, literature, artists, painting. It's going to happen again at some point. Today, we're at the bottom of the ladder.
It's also a lot of people understanding the technology, because a lot of people don't, they just put their head in the sand. And actually, a lot of it's about a commercial arrangement. I mean, Universal sort of said, you can't scrape the internet anymore for our copyright works, quite rightly, but a lot of that then
They don't know how to deal with it.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember I represented the live industry at a conference down at Medan, which is a music industry conference one year, where the three head commissioners from the EU attended. From what is called DG10, which is culture. And the head of GAMA, which is the equivalent of PR, the Performing Rights Society collection agency, stood up and said, you've got to stop the internet. And I was down there were 19 or 20 people in the room, the records publishing, blah, blah, blah. I go, are you insane? What do you mean stop the internet? You've got to embrace it. You can't stop it. Yeah. So that's how, people had their head in their sands then. They've got their head in their sands now about AI, saying you've got to stop it. Yeah. You can't. No. All you can do is embrace it and embellish it and make it and turn it to your own advantage. Absolutely. Which they have to do.
Yeah, and a lot of artists now looking at that saying, let's collaborate and actually we'll do a 50-50 split or whatever. If you recognise there's copyright and a bundle of rights to which they're entitled to a revenue stream, if you share that with the technology and make that make sense.
Well, yeah, how you share it is, of course, a long debate, but there has to be a move forward that everybody can get. It's always about balance, isn't it?
Holograms, what are your views on those?
They're okay. The ABBA thing was a cut above anything else that's ever been done. Same basic system. There's been a number of these shows of, people like Whitney Houston and Roy Orbison and things of that nature. If you shut your eyes, it kind of works. The ABBA one just went one step further and did it brilliantly. And they really have done it brilliantly. Whether there'll be any more, I got asked yesterday by one of the papers. They called me up. I was in the middle of a meeting and they said, we understand you're quoted as saying that the Beatles are going to do one. I said, I never said that. I was asked who else could do one like ABBA. I said, the only I could think of where globally it would work and globally it's worth the value is the Beatles, because the cost of what ABBA did is unbelievable. And so for somebody else to do it, they're going to have really, to do it properly.
Yes. And it needs to be done properly. You need to think that you're there with the real artist. And you can combine a hologram, obviously, with live performances.
Which is what they've done. Yeah. And been very clever. Yeah. And using Lucasfilm to do and all the film, real expertise to create the myth that you're really watching an ABBA, which you do feel it because the audience they want to feel it, so they do. But it's so much a cut above all the other hologram shows out there. For any other artist to do it, they will have to do the equivalent or better. And it's terribly expensive. So how do you recoup,
It'll get cheaper. And I think looking at those as opportunities.
Well, there are cheaper versions now, much cheaper versions. I mean, strangely enough, I chair the Rock and Roll Museum. It's called the British Music Experience. It's based in Liverpool. It's in the Cunard building. The three famous buildings. We're in the middle one. And we have a stage set up there. We have live shows, we have talks and all sorts of things. And we have a hologram there, which of a culture club. And it cost us 50 grand. And when we launched it, we invited a lot of press down and whatever. And everybody loved it. The next day, I got a phone call from the editor of the Liverpool Echo, who started yelling at me. I said, "What's the problem?" He said, "Why didn't you tell us?" I'm going, "Tell you what?" He said, "Why didn't you tell us the Culture Club were performing?" I thought, oh my God, how do I answer that one? He said, because otherwise we would have sent a reviewer down and this, that and the other, and we just made ourselves look idiots because everybody's talking about Culture Club performing. And I thought, I don't know actually what to say now. And I went, "Oh, I'm terribly sorry." And, I never really thought about it. And somebody should have said whatever. And I put the phone down. I thought, oh my God, I didn't realise it was that good. But it's brilliant.
And as you say, 50 grand.
50
grand. And as I say, it's going to get cheaper as the technology improves. Putting it all back and looking back at your career in the few seconds left, what do you think your major impact has been on the television coverage around the world of music events?
Well, I suppose I've been responsible for a fair few of them. Bob Dylan's 30th anniversary at Madison Square Garden, of producing shows for the Olympics. We did a show called China 2000 for the Chinese Olympics, which we shot 6 of them around the world. We did La Nit for Barcelona, which is how the Freddie Mercury and number came out. We did that course called La Nit, which we filmed, and it's doing all the concerts. And obviously Live Earth and Live Aid and Live 8 and so on and so forth, the Freddie Mercury tribute, always something special. You've got to have something special in mind to keep the audience. I think that's the main impact I've had, of being able to create shows and events that have value, that can survive TV and can work on TV. Obviously, Pavarotti in the Park's a classic. This happened in 1991. I still get people coming up to me in airports and kind of tugging me and going, "I was there, and I know exactly what they're talking about." It's extraordinary how the impact can have on certain types of events.
And the biggest
lots of concerts that they just shovel out.
Sure. And the biggest lessons learned?
The business lessons.
The biggest lessons.
Oh, the biggest lesson. I think with filming, you have to think very carefully. We did, when Pavarotti passed away, we did a tribute to Pavarotti in Petra, which on its own was the most extraordinary place I've ever been to in my life, which is this oasis inside a mountain where there's no power, no electricity, no nothing, and this beautiful sculptured buildings called the Treasury of the Ancestry and so on and so on. We did a tribute concerts there, was having a director that understands what music is. What happens today is most music TV shows that you see, you've got a director who's got itchy fingers and he's constantly changing the camera vision. So you're just about getting your head round looking at this artist performing from a medium shot, and suddenly it's flashed over here, then it's over there, then it's up here, then it's a long shot back. They're doing it the same with the proms. If you look at the classical music style of directing, it's exactly the same. It's bloody awful. And they ought to grow up and think about what they're doing. Because if you're watching a piece of Mozart or Beethoven or whatever with a big orchestra, you want to focus in on what's going on. And yes, you want to see the soloist. What you don't want to have is every 5 seconds, another camera shot, another camera shot, another camera shot, which is what they did on Top of the Pops 30 years ago. Grow up.
Finally, Harvey, and thank you for your time today. It's been absolutely brilliant. 3 last questions, very quick ones. What has been your biggest regret?
Elvis Presley. I tried very hard. I did a false Elvis Presley, actually at Crystal Palace at the garden party. I then had tea with the Colonels years after Presley died, but I never got Elvis Presley to come over and perform.
And your greatest achievement out of so many?
My greatest achievement? I don't know. For other people to tell me.
And finally, dramatic question. How would you like to be remembered?
For a great producer, bringing entertainment in the best possible way.
Harvey Goldsmith, thank you very much for your time.
Pleasure.